right, but knowing how they behave is even better, said John Mullen. In this presentation, we will discuss and define consumer behavior as well as the nature of consumer behavior. We will give a brief overview of the internal and external influences and give an influence factor of each. We will explain as well as state the market characteristics. Lastly, we will discuss the perceptual process and state three of the four stages.
Consumer behavior can be described as a set of effects and behaviors that occur prior to, during, and after a transaction happens. The study of how individuals, customers, groups, or organizations buy, pick, and use, dispose of their services and commodities to meet their needs and wants is also known as consumer behavior. It refers to the consumer's actions in the marketplace and why they take these actions. The term also indicates that consumers' decisions are influenced indirectly and is not just between the buyer and seller. This also means that when we talk about consumer behavior, that is not just individual customers, but also organizations, families, and different groups. Cards, Conley, and Klein define consumer behavior as all the consumer activities associated with the purchase, use, and disposal of goods and services, including the consumer's emotional, mental, and behavioral responses that precede, determine, or follow these activities.
Some consumers are health conscious and therefore they will buy food at Kauai. They are influenced by friends, family, and social media to rather turn to more healthier options rather than buying at fast food restaurants such as McDonald's and KFC.
The nature of consumer behavior is complicated because that of everyone's needs and desires are different. Individuals have indistinct ones, and as a result, they behave differently in the marketplace. Recognizing the demands and habits of each individual is a challenging demand for marketers. Therefore, identifying each consumer's behavior and targeting them appropriately is a hard job for the firm. Self-concept is a term that describes one's perception of oneself. A range of internal and external factors such as family, age, religion impact this. External and internal factors, market characteristics, and personal character traits all have an impact on the individual's self-concept and lifestyle.
Each individual person is different as well as their desires and demands. Therefore, they would rather buy food at a place such as Kauai. Kauai target individuals who are more health conscious and target them appropriately.
Internal influences are things that happen inside the mind and the heart of the consumer, and is mostly determined by the lifestyle and the mindset of the consumer. Internal influences can impact where and why a consumer buys a certain product or service. An example of internal influence is lifestyle. Lifestyle can impact where and why a consumer buys a product based on whether they live a healthy or unhealthy lifestyle. An example of how internal influences such as lifestyle can impact a business like Kauai is if a consumer lives a healthy lifestyle, he or she would much rather buy a healthy meal from Kauai rather than buying an unhealthy meal from McDonald's or KFC. External influences, on the other hand, are sources of impact on an individual, even though he or she has or is also influenced internally. External influence is also known as socio-culture influence and is the result of the formal and informal contact with friends, family, and others. An example of external influence is culture. Culture refers to the social behavior observed in human communities. Culture is the sum of ideas, values, beliefs, and attitudes. How external influence can impact a business like Kauai in the form of culture is if Kauai does not sell halal-based foods, the Islamic culture would not buy from Kauai, but would much rather buy from a business that sells a wide variety of halal-based foods.
Customers live in a physical place. In a physical location, products are manufactured, stored, transported, and used. Products have an impact on the physical characteristics of the environment which they are produced and used. Consumer behavior is influenced by the physical qualities of the marketplace as well as other market variables. The characteristics are economics and climate. Different climate can change the wants and needs of consumers, whereas the economic situation of a country has a major impact on both marketers and consumers, as well as the success of a company's marketing strategy. Consumers' ability and willingness to buy changes as inflation increases and inflation rates rise and fall. Some market characteristics can affect Kauai. Climate can affect the products that mostly sell in certain seasons, or what consumers are willing to buy. For example, some consumers won't buy a hot, healthy drink in the middle of summer. The same applies for winter. Some people won't buy an ice drink when it's cold outside. Certain foods that Kauai uses won't always be in season, and therefore they won't be able to make all the items on their menu. In terms of economic characteristics, when inflation increases, some consumers will be more hesitant to buy at Kauai as their prices are a bit more expensive than their competitors. Import costs will also increase, and this will lead to less profit for Kauai having to raise their prices.
Three of the four stages of the perceptual process include exposure, attention, and recall. The level to which an individual is aware of stimuli through their senses is referred to as exposure. The world is filled with different stimuli that will trigger an individual's senses at any moment. Exposure to communication implies that something is either heard or seen, but it does not imply that it is being paid attention to. Selective attention and selective exposure are important parts of exposure. Selective exposure occurs when information is presented that will support current views, contribute to ambitions, and provide a sense of fulfillment. Attention refers to the amount of processing activities committed to certain points of input. The key features that control attention are interests and or needs. The properties of stimuli play a vital role in determining what an individual will notice and what they don't. The way in which an individual interprets stimuli is influenced by the scenario they find themselves in. Attention is dependent on the mental state at the point of exposure or the characteristics of certain stimuli. In order for stimuli to get people's attention, it has to be unique. Marketers are able to create eye-catching features by using variations of bright colors, sizes, and positioning. Marketers try to ensure that their brand hold a significance in consumers' minds. They want potential customers to think about their brand when they are faced with a purchasing decision. This is referred to as a recall. The brand Kauai can gain exposure through different ad mediums such as television, radio, social media, or posters. A greater means of exposure will lead to higher chances of recall among consumers. However, the brand needs to keep in mind that even though they are advertising, it does not mean that every individual will necessarily be interested in their products. Not all consumers are as health conscious as Kauai expect them to be. It is not guaranteed that all the consumers will have a need for Kauai products. However, the brand will still strive to carry a significance in the minds of their potential customers in order for them to return to the brand at a later stage. Kauai's marketers also use point of purchase promotions to remind their customers of their previous marketing messages.
In conclusion, consumer behavior and the nature thereof plays an important role in the world we live in. All the components such as perceptual process, market characteristics, and internal and external influences play a huge role when analyzing the market and the consumers. As Alexander Wang said, When you focus on the consumer responds. Thank you.
1 second left, come on.
Yes.
1 second. Jeez. Nice. Okay, last and final group.